My name is Lance Walker. I'm Vice President, part owner with Michael Johnson here at Michael Johnson Performance in Dallas, Texas. Been here now 15 years, where our mission here is to help athletes realize their fullest potential regardless of sport, age, or ability level. And we've been doing it at a fairly high level and a fairly high rate now for a long time, and continue to look forward to the next 15 years of this space where technology like Vitruvian is going to change the game. Well, I've been in this field now almost 28 years. This field is sort of an amalgam of sports medicine, strength conditioning, and even research and science. Mix in some business now, and it's kind of four parts of an overall monster. But the reason for me initially getting into this space was my own background as an athlete. I was a very marginal athlete in Division I football, probably the worst Division I wide receiver in the history of Division I football, in the worst Division I program in the NCAA at the time, Kansas State. And it was so bad that not only was I running the practice squad, I was also getting playing time in games. And what it taught me, though, coming out of a small school into a college football setting, was that my preparation as a high school farm boy allowed me to be successful, even though I'd never lifted a weight. I had never done strength conditioning. I'd never done the things that these athletes behind me are doing now. That was non-existent at that time. But what it gave me was an ability to have a high work capacity, and it put me in a position to be successful in the college ranks where other better athletes than I were not successful. Very quickly, though, that turned into a limited return on investment. I actually became very injured and had many surgeries and many problems with my body, probably because I was not physically able to tolerate the rigors of that sport and at that level. And I was introduced to strength and conditioning, and that, hey, this is something now that you have control over. You have control over how well you are prepared for those activities, those demands. And I'd never heard that before. And it was a game changer for me. I spent a lot of time in rehabilitation, a lot of time with a strength conditioning coach to get me back into the ability to actually be somewhat competitive. But then also learned along the way that, wow, there's a science behind this. There's a why behind this work that we're doing. I'm not just doing physical labor. I'm doing something that will transfer to what it is that I love to do, which was play sport. And that piece of it pulled me into the science. And so from background of an athlete to a highly injured athlete, learning a lot about rehab and things that I could control that would help me not only keep out of rehab, but keep me playing at a higher level, I wanted to learn about the science of that. I wanted to know the science. And so that turns into graduate assistantships in research and graduate school, some publications, all along the way staying in that zone of the strength and conditioning side of the profession. And so what that did is it ultimately led me into becoming a sports medicine professional, a physio, still working in strength and conditioning all along the way. So for the better part of 12 years, I spent higher education trying to figure out how I take you as an athlete and overlap strength and conditioning and sports science and physio and nutrition and mindset to bring out the best in you, because I felt like I missed the boat with myself primarily. And what it's left me now, 28 years of doing this, overlapping science and the rigors of sports physiotherapy and medicine and strength conditioning, is we have no idea what we're doing. And that's shocking to some. I feel like I'm at the Mount Stupid of the Dunning-Kruger effect right now, that I figured out so much in this 28 years that I know that we have no concept of what you are capable of doing. That frustrates me. It also excites me. And it forces me into a space now where I'm looking at things very, very differently. I'm looking at everything as an opportunity to find unrealized human potential. So now it's leverage all that background, and it was good background, overlap technology and even business and consumerism and human behavior, psychology, even art, we're pulling those from those different areas into now trying to create the next generation of realization of potential. And it's exciting and it's daunting, and I'm hoping that the next 28 years of my profession here will uncover some things that are shocking to the world and to the industry of strength conditioning and sports performance. 28 years of engrossing everything that I do in a profession of sports performance, physio, strength and conditioning, nutrition, speed training, injury risk mitigation. 28 years later, I have found out one thing, and that is we have no idea what we are doing, what there is as opportunity for us to do better, and I'm very frustrated by that machine that tends to recycle all the old things now instead of looking for new things. And I think we as a profession owe it to our athletes like you and these athletes here that we raise our hand and say, you know what, there's a lot we don't know. We may be at the peak of Mount Stupid right now as a profession. I say that with all due respect. But I know in 28 years now that I don't know everything I need to know about making you a better version of yourself. And for that, I'm committed to the next 28 years of my profession and this profession as a whole to uncovering that, to realize your fullest potential. Technology is something that has actually been around in the sports performance business for a very long time. Some of the technology is not the kind that you plug in. A great example of that is the medicine balls that you see laying around back here. 25 years ago, those were vogue. Those are important things. And then 5 years later, we threw all the medicine balls out in favor of machines, the Nautilus waves and things. But now we're back to medicine balls. It's this recycling of old technology in new ways that has kind of been the norm, I think, in sports performance. We've seen in the last 5 years an addition of things like athlete management systems and data acquisition from the things that we've been doing for 30 years. Weightlifting now, it's not just do a rep, it's how good was that rep? How productive was that repetition? So it's the technology that's used as a lens to analyze and to pull out goodness from things that we know have been good for a long, long time. What I have not seen up until the last couple of years now is a real push to finding technologies that actually makes what it is that we are doing and that we know works better, that unlocks hidden potential. And that's the exciting thing now about technologies that are making you think differently about free weight exercises, about speed training, about power training. It's literally now flipping the script to, let's not just make the old stuff better, let's create again. Let's look at new things. Let's challenge the norm, not rewriting physiology. We know what your physiology is, but let's challenge conventional wisdom about getting that physiology the most benefit from what it is that we do with technologies that in some cases are just on poster boards right now. They're just thematic things. And being open to those themes, being open to those blue sky concepts is something the profession needs, and it's something that I've seen a real uptick in just the last few years. And great examples of that is the folks with Vitruvian and some of the blue sky thinking that they come with when they ask the question, what do you need to have happen? What do you need improved? Not how do you want to make your squat better? How do you want to make your bench press better? These athletes don't care about a better bench press. They don't. They want to play basketball at a higher level. They want to play football at a higher level. They do performance training as a means to an end. Different than fitness. Fitness, right? We like training. They don't like training. They like their sport. My job, get them better for their sport in the smallest amount of time, energy, resources needed so that they can spend more of those time, energy, and resources doing their sport. And technology is going to be the key to unlocking that. Resistance training has oftentimes in the past focused on output of numbers, like how much can you bench press, how much can you squat. In the last, say, 10 years or so, we've been focusing now on how much, how fast How much weight can you lift? How fast can you lift it? And then transferring that to how well now does that help you express your power as an athlete? But those are all things that are very concentric focused things, concentric outputs. And what we're finding now, we've known this for years, that the eccentric component, the kinetics of the eccentric components of everything that we just talked about are sort of the preloaded, the Holy Grail of the concentric outputs that come from that. And so I think what we're seeing now is a refocus on the importance of eccentric training, eccentric loading, but beyond just slowly lowering a bar or slowly with a tempo lowering a dumbbell. That's been around. We're talking about now is actually accentuated eccentrics, yielding eccentrics, eccentrics with isometrics, the trade-off between the eccentric and concentric phase, how important that little segment of the movement is, both in a weight room and out here sprinting. And we've kind of passed that aside for the previous 25 years, as that's just part of it. But now we're looking at that through its own lens and saying, wow, look at the goodness that can come from that, and look how much untapped stimulus we have been applying to that with our conventional training systems. And I think that's a real opportunity for performance and also injury mitigation. Injury risk can be reduced with appropriate training. Put that eccentric and an asterisk in there. Now, what does that do to risk mitigation? Does that reduce our risk of this guy getting a hamstring injury or an ACL? Does it reduce the risk of the 12, 13-year-old getting the Seaver's disease and things that are the growth plate issues because of that rapid bone growth without the fascicle lengthening? These are things that we know about physiologically, but we really haven't attacked as strength conditioning coaches, primarily because of a lack of ability to attack that. And that's where technology is going to now allow us, give us the tools to leverage that bandwidth of understanding to unleash hidden potential in performance, potentially reduce risk of injury, and potentially reduce the input necessary to get the gains in performance. All three of those are areas where eccentric training is going to be huge. Data for us, we've always collected data from the basic subjective data. How are you feeling today? You know, how hard was that workout? Rating of perceived exertions. Those are valuable data points, and it's low tech. All the way up into, how much force was that person putting in the ground when they were dragging that sled? What's the angle of that force? What's the ground reaction force coming back through? Is all that being translated through the sled and through the body to produce more speed and power? So there's the non-techie sort of data points, and then there's the deep down what's happening with the interactions of discrete little kinematics and kinetics and everything in between. And we've been collecting data now for 15 years, from 6-year-olds up to the elite and professionals that you see behind me. In some cases, collecting data for data collection's sake, because we didn't know what to do with some of it. And what we're finding now is the ability to aggregate that data from all these different sources into a centralized management system. And we've got a partner now that is an athlete management data aggregation system that allows us to pull that data in from all these different sources, from all these different athletes, and as sports scientists, analyze the data and make an assessment. Make a so what. Not just here's what, but so what. Here's the data, what does it mean? So assessment. And then where we've missed the boat in sports performance for so many years, with data specifically, is now what? Not just so what, your this was that and that was this. Now what? How are you going to apply that? Because ultimately these athletes don't care about their data at just the so what level. Don't tell me that my vertical jump is X number of watts. They don't care. Much less they don't care about some box plot that you put in front of them that's really wows a sports scientist. NFL defensive end ain't worried about a box plot of his vertical jump. What he is worried about is getting to more quarterback sacks. How do we link this metric, this data point, to what's important to him? That takes the so what and moves it into the now what, and it begins to tell a story for the athletes. What we're doing over here transfers to what's important over here. So data for us becomes more about the athlete than it does us as sports scientists. And that's a script flipper for the profession. And it's important to understand, it's important for us to figure out, because the more I can get these athletes engaged with the process, that this equates to this, the more they're gonna get out of this, right? The more they see transfer, but then also me as a sports scientist can begin to apply, what is it that that athlete needs to get to more quarterback sacks? He may not need to get stronger. He may be strong enough. He may need to get faster, not just faster, but faster at this angle or at this movement pattern. And so what it allows us to do is to get really narrowed down and refined on our side to stop wasting time. And I think in 28 years, I've wasted a lot of time, and I'm done with that. The author of the 8-Hour Work Week, I used to make fun of that person. Now I'm like, that's a genius. It shouldn't take me 10 hours a week to get an NFL player ready for camp. If it doesn't take me 10 hours a week to do it, why am I doing it? Well, it's because I'm ticking the we're working out box. And I think that's where data is going to retell the story for me. It's going to help us recalibrate our prescriptions. And most importantly then, attach this data, this stuff we're doing out here, to what's most important to the athlete. And only through data and data aggregation, management systems that help us tell the so what, it's ever gonna do that. Otherwise, it's just gonna be a lot of hard work for something we think transfers to your sport. Technology in Vitruvian allows me, as a coach, to snag all the data that's going on with my workouts. But it allows me to then, I can get really deep into the data points individually, or I can pull up a level and kind of get a forest for the trees look. And I think that's a very valuable piece of this tech, is it's pulling all these data points that are important to me as a coach. But then what I can do is I can then create a narrative that makes that important for the athlete, which is the most important bit. And so for me as a coach, it's the deep down data that we're able to pull and push. Things like range of motion for each rep, the speed within those ranges of motion, the absolute force of each rep or the average force over the series of reps. How does the amount of force that the athlete is creating in that workout compare to their rating of perceived exertion? They thought they were really working hard, but they were 28% below what they thought was working out hard last week. Bing, bing, bing. There's flags that go off for me as a coach to know that, but there's also then the athlete side of it. Hey, you think you're working hard. You're at 28% below where you were last week thinking you were working hard. Okay, what's going on? Or it could be the flip of that. Now the athlete becomes aware of the data and knows, hey, I'm gonna do my best, right? I'm gonna do the best that I possibly can, and they're looking at that previous data as a cookie, as a carrot. I've got to get that. And so it can inherently take me as the coach motivator, the rah-rah, the pom-pom guy, out of the equation. I've attached this as a metric that's important for you. This is how we're gonna get there. This is how it's gonna link up to your performance. Here was your performance last time. I'll see you in 20 minutes. Right? And I can go be lazy. I can go whatever. In some cases, it's a better motivation for that athlete to internally motivate against this machine or against their own data than it is for me to come out here and try to, spit and claw and throw pom-poms in the air and try to get you fired up, or have to feed you a bunch of caffeine or something, or turn the music way up. No, this becomes very real for you if you're an athlete wanting to get better. This needs to get better to get to that. What do you need me for? If you're bought into that, the data is going to help you get there and motivate you to get there, gosh, man, you don't need a coach anymore. It's you versus you. Go. So eccentric training for us becomes an efficiency and an effective thing. It's not just that eccentrics is part of a concentric lift. It's like you have to have the eccentric to have the concentric. We really look at both pieces of that puzzle when we train here at MJP, and really athletes around the world are doing this regardless of what sport. They're seeing the benefits of not only the concentric output, but what are they doing on that eccentric? How good is that eccentric? How much load is in that eccentric? Can I add more load to the eccentric and unload and use that the reduced load in my concentric? So we're teasing out the benefits now of actually looking at this as a two-part puzzle or a sandwich, right? Two pieces of the sandwich, the top and bottom of the bun. Where that meat is where those begin to interface with one another, where the concentric and the eccentric begin to blend over. And so much of what we do in sport has to do with impact with the ground or impact with somebody else. And it's that impact or that impulse, that magic moment that happens when someone's foot strikes the ground in the track, that we are so much more enamored with now than ever before, because we know that's where the magic happens. That's really where world class separates from average, is that impact and impulse. And there's both a concentric component to that, and then there's this huge eccentric component. So for us, it is quality, it's effectiveness of the eccentric, but it's also the efficiency. And so if we know that if I get you 10 quality repetitions at a concentric load that's 85% of what you could do one time, we know that's the dose that's going to elicit a response concentrically to get you stronger, right? That's the minimum effective dose for our athletes here. But what's the minimum effective dose if the eccentrics are accentuated? We don't know. Nobody knows. What we do know is when you begin to accentuate those eccentrics, when you begin to really focus in on the quality and quantity of the eccentric component, there's only one direction that number is going to go, and it's going to go down. I don't know if it's 10, but I'm guaranteeing you it's 10 or less when we begin to really tease out the eccentrics. And with technology now, we're able to do that at a level and measure it at a level now that will ultimately rewrite some of the minimum effective dosages of prescriptions for improving force production in athletes. Yeah, so the technology in the V-form that I'm really enamored with and curious about is the application of these eccentric accentuations, either eccentric only or added eccentric loading, or that you can actually try your hardest. It's almost a yielding eccentric against the machine, and it's going to sit there and dose more and more and more on you to keep at a certain speed. Those are things that I can't do right now in my weight room. I just can't. I can try with chains and bands and bungees and air and all these other things, but it's almost impossible for me to do consistently, repetitively, but certainly hard for me to do and still collect data on to find out what is this actually doing. And so V-form allows me to do that, and it allows me to do it in a space that's this big, and do it repetitively, consistently, time over time over time, in a way that I've never been able to do before. So ultimately, it's changing the way that I'm looking at that eccentric component, both from an efficiency standpoint, how much do I need to do, but also then from an effectiveness standpoint. Now I know what I've done eccentrically now that I don't know what I've done eccentrically here with just tempos. What does that translate to performance now? So that's the unlock now is, wow, now we're measuring it, now we're monitoring it, now we can actually manage it for what it is that we're trying to do with it, which is transfer to sport. I don't care about your eccentric strength unless it transfers to your sport in a positive way. Only then should you care about it, or should I care about it? Because you don't care about getting sore, you don't care about fascicles being longer, you don't care about impulse rate of force, you don't care about any of that science unless it changes your game out here. Only then do you care as an athlete. And that's where this is going to allow us to really focus and do things that, quite honestly, we haven't even thought about doing in the past.